Alvin Plantinga tends to frame this in defense of theism as potentiality versus actuality, that in some cases we're talking about the potential to do something versus actually doing something, and there might be a way to make sense of divine foreknowledge there. Other people, though, are incompatibilists about it. Even those who might be theists. You might say, look, human knowledge and God's knowledge just cannot be compared. So Nelson Pike argues famously, look, either give up free will or God's omniscience. You cannot have both, right? They're incompatible with each other. So I'd be curious to know what you think. I mean, do you think there's a meaningful way to make sense of divine foreknowledge and free will? If yes, then, right, you're going to have to give an argument one way or the other. Or, as some philosophers have chosen to do, just bite the bullet and say, yeah, give up free will or God's omniscience. Can't have both at the same time. Okay, let's get to the more famous argument against theism in the problem of evil. So the problem of evil, very famous problem. If you're anything like me, it's something that you've thought about for a long time. There seems to be a lot of evil in the world, right? And there's a couple different ways of framing this. If we look at quite a few other religions other than just the Western Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, a lot of religions, especially indigenous religions and even other ancient religions, this isn't as much of a problem for them. So I think that's good that we have a note about this, because if you look at other belief systems, evil was acknowledged and even made part of the belief system in ways that Christianity and even Islam and Judaism haven't quite done to the same degree. So you might think that, like Zoroastrianism, God is both a force of evil as well as good. So evil is not really a problem that needs to be reconciled. But certainly for the monotheistic traditions that most of us are already familiar with, it is a problem for philosophers and for theists to have to deal with. So we're taking that problem at face value. So the philosophical problem is really this, right? Again, people associate specifically omnibenevolence with God, that God is all good. But then we look at the world and we see there's a lot of suffering, a lot of evil. And not just that, a lot of evil that could be prevented, a lot of needless suffering, a lot of needless evil that could very easily be prevented, right? So whether it's people dying from COVID-19 or from fires, plane crashes, or famine, right? I mean, take your pick. There's a lot of evil in the world. A lot of senseless death, senseless violence that doesn't really seem to be part of any kind of plan. So how does the theist account for this, right? Because the problem is, if such a being existed, then they wouldn't allow evil, but yet evil clearly occurs. So we've got some hard choices to make here. So we've got a logical problem that might lead to God doesn't exist. So this is what many philosophers have argued. This follows deductively from the inherent contradiction between God and evil's existence. They cannot both be true. So one, you've got to give up one, the existence of evil. So just deny that there is evil, which seems like a tough sell, or give up one of God's attributes. Okay, so lots of philosophers like J.L. Mackie have made this argument that, look, they're just not simpatico. God's omnibenevolence with the sheer amount of unnecessary evil in the world, they're just not compatible. So that's a logical problem. The other way to frame it is what we might call the evidential problem. To say something like, it's not that it's logically impossible, it's just very unlikely that God exists given the amount of unnecessary suffering and evil in the world, right? It's not a deductive inference, rather it's an inductive one, and it's from the amount of unnecessary evil in the world. Because it seems unlikely, according to this way of framing it, that such a being would allow so much evil, right? So one must either give up the existence of one of God's attributes or explain why such a God would allow so much evil. And so there's a couple different ways of framing this. William Rowe famously does this in his problem of evil argument, or his argument against theistic belief. Okay, so there's a couple of common rejoinders at this point. Some people, like I mentioned, they actually just deny that evil exists. They just say that it's something else, right? That evil is just a construct of the mind. I mean, that's one way, but regardless of how we frame it, we want to take the most straightforward and basic notion of evil. And I think most of us would agree that there is still, whether we call it evil or suffering, there's a lot of that going on. And there's a lot of that going on in even worse in certain parts of the world, right? Where children are dying from preventable diseases or right, lack of clean drinking water, things like that. So however we want to frame it, it should be clear that there's a wide variety of what normally we would call evil that needs to be accounted for.